There is a phrase that I will always remember until my dying day of she chose to get pregnant over athletics. I was going to give birth 3 days before Boston Marathon, but birth isn't seen as an injury. Conceiving is seen as an injury. I just want to run marathons because I want to run marathons. That shouldn't change anything in my relationship of me as a mum. That's all I'd ask for, is just respecting that diversity in our sport is the coolest thing ever. So my name's Fiona, I'm 36, I'm from London, and I spend a lot of time running around northwest London. In particular, I absolutely adore Hampstead Heath. So if you're going to find me anywhere, you're going to find me on the Heath. Yeah.
That's how it goes.
Crazy. Well, we're doing London, so yeah.
I'll see you there. You'll do great.
See you there. I'm terrified. 8 weeks to London. I'm excited. It's one of those rare times where I know I've got a good PB. So yeah, 15 minutes off, that's the goal. Yeah, big, but I think it's realistic. Yeah. Running is a really important part of who I am, as well as something that I do. So it's something I take really seriously, but I wouldn't say I'm particularly great at it. I love that it teaches me to fail, and I probably am most likely to be found naturally as a trail runner, although since having a baby, I find road running is more fun and quicker. I think there's something very pure about the marathon. There's that brilliant quote, isn't there, from Bromka, that is, the marathon doesn't owe you anything. And I think that's what I love about marathon running, is there's something that does require consistency, hard work, tenacity, guts, an ability to put yourself out there that maybe doesn't exist in everyday life, and that many other racing settings or running settings don't give you. I think there's something very pure about training for 6 months for one big goal. And ultimately, if you do put in consistency and hard work, you will see some results. Maybe it won't be the perfect result, but actually there is a level of you put in a certain amount of hard work and you get results that I think is so satisfying for me from marathon training. So if we look at women specifically in running, and we don't look at Couch to 5K and we don't look at pro runners, you'll notice, I'm sure, anyone watching this video, that if you go out and run a marathon, there is a massive drop-off that we're seeing of women, particularly in their 30s, from our sport. So they're just disappearing from our sport. And that's partially because in the UK, the advice in terms of healthcare professionals would be around Couch to 5K. And that's partially as well, I'd say, because the examples we often see online and around some of the rules are around thinking about pro athletes or keeping people very safe and trying to only allow them to run 5K. 5K is amazing, Couch 5K is great, pro runners are great, but what about everyone in the middle? And I think specifically how we train through pregnancy is really undocumented, it's really not known, and then how we recover from what is ultimately the trauma of birth. I had a C-section, so how do you recover from an operation that is the same size and scale as a knee replacement? There's no science around that, there's no evidence around that, but also the advice from people isn't that that's a good thing. So I would say that marathon running as a mum is a really good thing. And that's quite controversial, even in itself as a statement. So empowering the women around us and saying, great, you want to have time for yourself. And you want to do that just because it makes you feel great and it doesn't change who you are as a mum. All of that narrative is lovely, but actually, I just want to run marathons because I want to run marathons. That shouldn't change anything in my relationship of me as a mum. So I'd run 17 marathons when I ran, unexpectedly, I would say, a BQ in Paris Marathon in 2022. I've worked super hard, but it's just taken me so many years to get a good for age time that when I ran a BQ, took 17 minutes off my time. I was both super proud and quite shocked to qualify for Boston. So it's incredible. I think Boston is one of those things, isn't it, where that feels like a level suddenly in running that does mean I maybe take myself a bit more seriously, or I feel I have a right to be there. And so achieving a BQ was amazing. At the same time as getting that BQ, I was in my mid-30s. My husband and I of 10 years had decided that we were going to try getting pregnant. It wasn't working. So I didn't put my running on hold. I kept running. It takes a year in the NHS scheme to even be allowed to go for tests. So we just got to the testing stage. I entered my Boston time at the same time I found out I was pregnant. But I am surrounded by a lot of friends, this week included, whose pregnancies don't stick early on. And I think being in my mid-30s, not having had an easy ride, I didn't necessarily think it was going to be that easy. So I submitted my time for Boston, which was amazing. It was only 3 minutes inside, so I also didn't know if I would get in or not. At the same time as waiting for my 12-week scan, that's the first time you're allowed to see your doctor. Found out I got into Boston, found out my pregnancy had stuck, asked the insurance company to refund my Boston entry, and was told that pregnancy wasn't seen as a major injury. So tearing my calf would get my money back at Boston, but not being pregnant. I think one of the things that we as humans invariably do and find difficult is we often hear the negatives more than we hear the positives. And so probably 90% of the feedback I got was people saying, I had no idea this was a thing. This doesn't affect my life, but like, wow, it does affect yours. And actually, I have a handful of women in my life at some point that this might affect. And I do think that you're right. I think that they should get their bibs. That's probably the majority of the response I got. Probably 5% was women going, I've either experienced this or I am experiencing this. And I would say almost crying down the phone to me through Insta, which is really humbling and amazing. And yeah, 5% was really negative. There is a phrase that I will always remember until my dying day of she chose to get pregnant over athletics. And I think that's often the attitude that a lot of people have about this stuff, is they believe that being pregnant and the way we experience pregnancy is A, very nice and fluffy and cute and lovely and easy. B, that you get to pick when it happens. You get to pick that it's going to be easy. And the idea, I would absolutely love the idea that I opened my calendar and was like, here's a really good 9 months. And then the other side of that 9 months, it's going to take me 6 weeks to get back the other side and I'll be running the way I was before. It's just not like that, and I don't think we talk about that. Or often people think, well, because it doesn't affect me, I'm not going to tune into that narrative. But there's some simple education that we can all give one another of going, of course it's not like Hollywood. Just like when we watch romantic comedies, falling in love is not like Hollywood. Getting pregnant and giving birth is not the way that films have told us. This is complicated because we're talking about two things here. We're talking about the rules as they were, which for me, I was really interested in. I was going to lose my job as a result of being pregnant. I was going to have a massive salary reduction. And so I needed my $360 back that I paid to enter Boston. Just to be really simple, like I just wanted my money back. And so if you tore your calf and you paid for that insurance, you would get your money back. You would not get your money back if you were pregnant when you applied for the Boston ballot, irrespective of, I was going to give birth 3 days before Boston Marathon. But birth isn't seen as an injury, conceiving is seen as an injury. So obviously the rules as they are now, and I guess where it becomes totally difficult for some of the people who are going to watch this and challenging is there is now a deferral policy that exists for Boston for pregnancy and postpartum. And if you tear your calf, you can't apply for that because that is a pregnancy and postpartum thing. And I respect that that is super hard for some people watching who love marathoning, and injury is a thing that we will all face in our sport at some time. But that deferral rule just exists for pregnancy and postpartum. I guess this is where things like Boston and London are brilliant in terms of there is age and gender based times for qualifying. And I would remind people that for women, that's even more complicated in terms of when we fit in age and gender, because probably for most of the women in their 30s, they are making decisions around having kids. For women in their 40s, they're making decisions around how that fits with perimenopause and menopause. For women in their 50s, they're then dealing with things like bone density coming in. And so the sports science isn't great when it comes to this stuff, but actually our sport has already naturally set up a system that does enable women in their late 30s to have a easier opportunity to run a major like Boston or London than a man who's 25. And so bigger than anything, if you are a guy who doesn't understand this stuff, just respecting that it's really flipping cool to have a woman who's 75 running Boston Marathon as well as you. That's all I'd ask for, is just respecting that diversity in our sport is the coolest thing ever, and is something that we should champion and celebrate. And I'm sure most people watching that would agree with that. Isn't it cool that I, at parkrun the other week, ran my fastest ever parkrun PB, and 2 places in front of me was a 9-year-old girl. Ouch, that hurt, but flipping heck was that cool and inspiring. Like, I want to be beaten by 9-year-old girls, just as I want to be beaten by 85-year-old vet men. So yeah, the more diversity we have in our sport, the better. And I think all of this stuff around pregnancy, etc., just reminds people that for a lot of women, there is a chunk of their 30s where their bodies are going to dramatically change. And we just need help, therefore, to make sure that we're able to reintroduce them back into our sport. Pre-baby, my marathon PB was 3:27. Last year I ran Berlin as an easy, fun experience. I chatted with a mate the whole way around and ran 3:30 just to feel confident marathoning again. So I'm targeting London, and I'm targeting it to run really hard. So for me, I think that probably looks like 3:15. My husband's PB is 3:11, so there's a little part of the back of my brain that says beat that. Championship time obviously has just gone down, so I think I need to run 3:09. So there's a dream on the day that looks like that, but I think 3:15 is realistic, particularly juggling being a mum, work, training, all of that fun, complex mix. So yeah, and I think I'm someone who my very first marathon was 5:47. So if I could run 3:15, there is a level of where I would have got to, particularly as someone who didn't run when they were younger, used to be quite overweight, only started running regularly when I was about 24, 25, like 3:15 would be phenomenal for me. So London has a deferral policy. However, you have to pay twice. So it's not really a deferral policy. Last year I ran 3 good for age times in 3 marathons. So I could have qualified for London last year, but when I was pregnant, I couldn't have guaranteed to you that that's what it was going to look like. I had no idea how my recovery would go. And so my London qualified time, I deferred. That's the bib I'm about to run on. I'm very excited about the fact that I have a London place, but I've paid twice to be there. So I have got to keep my bib, but I have paid the pregnancy tax in order to be there. So if we look at Boston, they're the only people who've released these stats recently. So Boston, the year that's just gone, their first year of pregnancy deferrals, they had 56 women running under a pregnancy deferral. It's $360-ish to run Boston. It's 70 quid-ish to run London. So I can't tell you the exact stats on pregnancy deferrals because London sadly don't release it. Come on, London. Let's tell everyone our figures. Why not? It's great. Let's celebrate it. It's awesome that there are women who've had babies who are coming back and trying to run fast still. But we're talking minuscule amounts of money in the volume of money that London is taking in bibs.